Hello and welcome everybody to the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences Virtual Science Cafe. My name is Chris. I am your host for our virtual experience that we have for you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us here on YouTube to be a part of what I know is going to be an amazing science cafe. Every Thursday night, we bring you the Science Cafe. Normally, we have our guest speakers in downtown Raleigh at the Museum of Natural Sciences. Can't really do that these days, right now. So we've partnered with our digital media team. We got everything together so that we could bring you these presentations right here online. So thanks for tuning in. Glad that you could all be here. As we move through the show tonight and as we hear from our guest speaker, leave your questions and your comments there in the chat box. Our team is monitoring that. I'll be taking a look at it so that we can get to your questions after the presentation and pose those to tonight's special guest. I will lay down at least one ground rule, which is please be nice, be respectful of other people in the chat box, be respectful of our guest. It's the internet, yeah, so let's keep it civil there in the chat. Thanks for doing that. I hope that you're excited. Even though I can't see you, you can see me right now. Raise your hand if you love sharks. Yeah, everybody loves sharks. At least you should, right? And if you don't, I think that tonight's guest can change your mind. And if you do love sharks, you're going to get all of the great reasons why. Tonight's very special guest is Dr. David Shiffman. David, hello.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well too.
I am happy to be virtually back in the Triangle. Went to Duke for undergrad and love the museum there.
That's right. That's right. You did go to Duke. I had actually forgotten about that. I went to Duke too, but just for a 2-year thing. I think you have like the real 4-year Duke degree.
Yep.
Well, everybody, let's meet David. Dr. David Shiffman is a marine conservation biologist. He studies sharks. Right now, he's based out of Washington, D.C. He's also an award-winning public science educator. Okay, he's written about sharks, marine biology, conservation for the Washington Post, Scientific American, and he also is writing a monthly column right now for Scuba Diving Magazine. David is one of the most followed scientists in the world on social media. And you can follow at Why Sharks Matter on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Always top tier content. And if you follow David, you will learn more than you ever thought you could about sharks. David, why do sharks matter?
Why do sharks matter? Well, the predators help keep a food chain in balance. And when we're talking about the ocean, we're talking about food chains that support tens of millions of jobs and provide food for billions of humans. So that's ecosystems we'd very much like to keep healthy, and healthy shark populations help regulate the ocean.
Well, everybody, wow, okay. I think we should learn more. Let's dive into the Science Cafe and welcome our guest, Dr. David Shiffman.
Great. All right, thanks, Chris, for that great introduction. It's nice to be virtually back in the museum. I actually did one of these science cafes in person right when they were first starting in, I think, 2011 or 12. But happy to be joining you from my home office under the sea, just in Washington, D.C. here. And I'm going to share with you tonight some things in life that I've learned from sharks. And before I get started, I want to note, as Chris noted, I am big on the social medias. I would love for you to tweet along with this talk if you're so inclined, or share pictures of your family watching it on Instagram. I just ask that you please tag me at Why Sharks Matter so I can find and share the posts later. So I'm a marine conservation biologist. What does that mean? Well, it means that I use science I do science, and I use science to better inform conservation and management policy for threatened shark species. Sometimes that means I'm out on the boat tagging sharks and taking blood samples from sharks and measuring sharks. Sometimes it means I'm talking to you, members of the public, through the news or through talks at museums like this. A lot of times it means I dress up like an idiot and talk to school groups, as you see there. I'm going to share with you today some things that I've learned about sharks from my career that I hope can be useful to your own life. And when I say you can learn lessons from sharks, I don't mean to suggest that sharks are exactly like us, but they are, in fact, a lot. They're a lot more similar than a lot of people might think. And in fact, there's a wonderful book about this called Your Inner Fish, which is a story of the evolution of vertebrate animals, brilliantly told, meant for non-expert audiences. It's also a PBS special, which is free online for the parents out there that are looking for ways to entertain their kids for a few hours. But if you look at the inside of a shark, you'll recognize just about everything that you're looking at. We are perhaps not so different after all. So I'm going to share some lessons for you told from the perspective of sharks. First lesson is everything happens for a reason, and sometimes that reason is you make bad decisions. There are a lot of, I want to talk a little bit about shark bites here. When most people hear about sharks, and yeah, I'm just going to leave that looping because it cracks me up every time I see it. When most people hear about sharks, they hear about them in the context of sharks biting people, which does happen, but it's very, very, very rare. If you've ever been in the ocean, there was a shark near you and it knew you were there and it wasn't bothering you for the most part. Hundreds of millions of humans go in the ocean every year. 40 to 70 are bitten, most of which are very, very minor bites. And maybe a handful are killed. And any human injury or death is a tragedy, but it's important to keep in mind the relative risk. I mentioned earlier in the introduction why it's important to have sharks around. I want to tell you that that doesn't mean there's no cost, but the cost is so low. Some things that are greater sources of mortality than sharks include not paying attention while taking a selfie and falling off a cliff. That kills more people than sharks every year. Flower pots falling from apartment balconies onto the street below kill more people every year than sharks do. Vending machines, those things are death traps and kill a lot more people than sharks do every year. So what's happening in this picture is a scuba diver that is perhaps being insufficiently careful around a wild animal. To put it mildly, you don't see people try to give hugs and kisses to grizzly bears when they go on hikes. More on this phenomenon of humans interacting with sharks a little later in the talk. But everyone's heard of the great white. That's what's behind me in my virtual background here. A little known fact about sharks is that most great whites are actually mediocre, just very, very confident. So great whites are the most famous shark species. On the last Shark Week 2019, I think 2/3 of the specials were partially or entirely about great whites. But great whites are cool. I like them just fine. But there's a lot of different species of sharks out there. They come in just about every shape and size and color and behavior that you can imagine. And I have some of my favorite weirdos highlighted here. In the upper left, you see a thresher shark. Look how big their tail is. It's as big as the rest of their body combined. I have more about thresher sharks coming up later. The top center, that's a frilled shark. Their body's almost the same shape and dimensions as that of a snake. The center is an angular rough shark, which is about the least hydrodynamic fish ever created other than maybe a mola mola. The bottom left is a megamouth shark. They are a deep sea species that was discovered when a US Navy vessel accidentally hit one with their anchor in the 1970s. Otherwise, it would have been another 10 or 15 years before people discovered one. They have glow-in-the-dark gums, and they live in the deep sea where it's so dark that light never reaches. And fish see the light and swim towards it, and they swim right into the megamouth's mouth. Megamouths also have, in my professional opinion, the coolest scientific name of any animal in the ocean. Normally, scientific names translate to something boring, like the gray bird with the black spot on its back or something. Megamouth sharks, their scientific name is Megachasma pelagios, which sounds cool in that, but it translates to giant mouth of the deep. By scientist standards, that's almost poetry. One of the sharks that I've been talking about a lot recently is Greenland sharks. I don't have a photo of one here, but they're a really cool species. They live under Arctic ice, and they are the longest lived animal in the world. They can live to be over 400 years old. They are still considered reproductively immature juveniles until they're in their late 150s. That's a long time to be going through puberty. And they eat polar bears and reindeer. So sharks there's a lot more going on with sharks than you might otherwise suspect from just watching Shark Week, which just tells the same boring stories about gray whites over and over again. In fact, according to the latest edition of Sharks of the World, which is a reference guide, there are 550 known species of sharks, and there is a new species of shark, skate, ray, or chimera. Those are the shark relatives. A new species of them discovered every 2 weeks. So there's a lot left to discover still in the ocean. But for those of you who are watching from North Carolina, you don't have to travel far to see something amazing. Right in your backyard, in the Outer Banks, there are lots of amazing species of sharks, including some of the most famous species of sharks, as well as some lesser known ones that are still pretty cool. This is a great article that was written by my friend Chuck Bangley back when he was a PhD student at East Carolina University about the sharks of North Carolina. I encourage you to check that out. But Chuck led a research project that I was a participant on and found something really cool about sharks of North Carolina. That there's this well-known phenomenon in the climate change literature of what's called a range shift. Basically, when it gets too hot somewhere, animals that are adapted to it being slightly less hot will just move to where it's slightly less hot. In our hemisphere, that means north. And Chuck discovered the first evidence of that happening to large, potentially dangerous sharks next to a inhabited coastline. That was bull sharks moving into the North Carolina Outer Banks. So the first evidence of sharks moving because of climate change may be happening right off North Carolina. So here's my thresher shark again. I just love an excuse to throw in this meme because thresher sharks are a really, really tough, awesome species of shark. They have that giant tail. You can see in the GIF there that they use it as a whip to stun prey. It makes a shockwave in the water and then they can just munch on the prey. But their faces are so adorably derpy. I just love them. So sharks are often thought of as the top dog, the top of the food chain, and in many cases they are. But there's always a bigger fish. There's always something. Just because you're bigger than someone doesn't mean someone else is bigger than you. And it's important to carry yourself with that knowledge in mind. Here we see a crocodile eating a bull shark, a seal, or I think that's a Cape fur seal, eating a blue shark, an orca taking out a thresher. They also take out great whites and tiger sharks. And that is a osprey taking out a baby bonnethead. So even birds eat sharks sometimes. No one tell the hashtag Team Bird people on Twitter about that picture. Related to that, good advice I learned just about being a professional is be nice on your way up. You may meet someone again on your way down, and you don't want them to have been spending years plotting their revenge. On the right there, you see that famous picture of the great whites hunting seals. But yeah, seals eat sharks too. There are, in fact, some species of sharks that school. So it's okay to get help from your friends when you need it. Scalloped hammerheads is what you see there, schooling. They have these amazing behaviors where the biggest ones are on the outside of the school to protect the smaller ones on the inside. But also it's important to take care of things on your own. What you're seeing here is a lemon shark being born. As soon as that shark is born, it has to be able to swim on its own and fend for itself, find its own food, and get away from its mother. Sharks have no parental care at all, unless you define not eating the babies immediately as parental care, which some of you who have been trapped with your kids for a month at this point may define it that way. So where baby sharks come from, and we couldn't give a talk without mentioning baby shark, where baby sharks come from is actually fascinating and diverse. Some species of sharks give live birth, like what you see here with these lemon sharks. Some species of sharks lay eggs. Some species of sharks have a weird mix of that's only found in sharks, where the pups and baby sharks are called pups. The pups grow up inside eggs, but the eggs hatch inside the mother, and then they're born as if live. Some species of sharks are capable of parthenogenesis, which is a big fancy science word for cloning yourself. If a mom does not have a suitable dad around and wants to have babies, she can just become pregnant, and instead of the babies being a mix of her DNA and that of a father, they're just exact copies of her. Some species of sharks have what's called multiple paternity. Females will mate with multiple males during mating season, will become pregnant by all of them at once, and will give birth to a litter of half siblings. They have the same mother but different fathers. And some species of sharks, if the female mates and then decides, you know what, I don't want to get pregnant now, they can store the sperm for up to 4 years and then decide to get pregnant when the conditions are better. This is not necessarily advice from a shark, but it is my favorite shark meme. And there are a lot of great shark memes out there. As a creature of the internet, I appreciate meme culture. And there's a lot of good ones with sharks, but this is one of my favorites. Taking advantage of unexpected opportunities is indeed sometimes something that some sharks do, though. There are some species that are what are called specialist predators. And that means they really only eat one thing. But there are others that are called generalist predators. And that means whatever's around, or to some extent, whatever's around, they'll eat. And these species are more adaptable to environmental change. Because if you only eat one thing, what happens to you if that thing leaves because of a climate change range shift, or is overfished, or otherwise gets infected by a disease? Then you're in trouble too. So being adaptable is great survival advice from these animals that have survived have survived so long that there were sharks swimming in the ocean before there were trees on land. This is one of my favorite interactions. This is actually a shark eating another shark. But the large animal that you're seeing on the eat the smaller one is an angel shark. They can lie flat on the sand, even buried under the sand, for days until something swims so close that they can open their mouth and it makes a suction and just sucks things right in. That uses a lot less energy than what the great white shark does, chasing the seals and launching itself out of the water. Angel sharks are some of my favorite sharks, and many species several species of them are unfortunately critically endangered. Sitting on the bottom like that means they can't get out of the way of fishing nets that are being dragged across the bottom. Something that has taken me too long to learn, but it's good advice from Star Wars, is a great many things in life depend on your point of view. What you're seeing here is the same news stories presented from multiple perspectives. On top, in the upper left here, you see a real news story. Shark steals catch from woman's fishing rod. A shark jumped out of the water and stole their catch. I rewrote that headline as fish-eating animal eats a fish. An animal that usually eats fish ate a fish. You see how those two headlines convey the exact same information, but one makes you scared and one makes you wonder why we're talking about this. In the lower right, on the left side, there's a lot of scary headlines these days of, oh my God, someone went to the beach and they saw a shark. Yeah, that's where they live. Near the beach is also called the water, and that's where fish live. If you see a shark going down Main Street, give me a call. But until then, maybe we don't need to report it every time someone sees a fish in the water. Something that I deal with now as a scientific and environmental consultant and someone who studies where people learn information about sharks that informs their policy opinions, something that I encounter is what's sometimes called the Dunning-Kruger effect, that people who know a little bit about something are extremely confident that they know everything. And this is problematic when dealing with technical details related to science and conservation policy. Problematic to say the least. This is something that I have an entire talk length rant about that if you guys are really hard up for talks and want to have me back again, depending on how long this shutdown goes. But yeah, this is a real issue that something that author Tom Nichols calls the death of expertise. That there are people who watch a documentary once and think they're the world's leading expert on shark conservation, and everyone else has a PhD and decades of experience and a track record of success, they don't know anywhere near as much as me because I'm the expert. As I watched the show and I read a book. It's led to some troubling interactions online. Related to this, trying to help is great. But it's wonderful that people want to help. It's wonderful that people try to help. Trying to help is not the same thing as actually helping. In the upper right here, you see someone who is protesting overfishing by suspending themselves with fish hooks through their back outside a fishing market in Hong Kong. I'm sure you'll be shocked to learn that after this protest, overfishing continues to be a problem. This, in fact, did not solve a worldwide issue, just staging a flashy protest. On the bottom there, you see a post from our blog, Southern Fried Science, one of the most widely read science blogs in the world, ranting about those goofy environmental petitions that people share on Facebook. One example that drives me just insane is I lived in Florida for 6 years, getting my PhD at the University of Miami, and I saw all the time petitions that say we need to ban shark finning in the state of Florida. We did in 1993. So those petitions cannot possibly accomplish their stated goal, and they get 10, 20, 50,000 signatures. And then I ask people to write in to support a real thing that's actually being discussed in front of NOAA or Congress. And they say, oh no, I've done my part to help sharks this month. I signed that petition. So this is, again, something I rant about a lot. In the upper left there, you see there's been this trend recently of wildlife harassment framed as education. That these people engage in riding sharks, grabbing sharks, hugging sharks, flipping sharks over. And as you saw in that video near the beginning, sometimes that ends poorly for the diver. But this is the argument here seems to be, watch how I can annoy this beautiful wild animal and it doesn't try to eat me, therefore we should protect them. This is not an argument that makes a lot of sense to me. Just like science, education and outreach and conservation are technical disciplines. And there are rules, and words mean things. And the people who are doing this are not helping the way that they think they are, to put it mildly. It's important to be yourself. Don't let, if you have someone, if you have someone who tells you no, that you shouldn't wear a giant foam rubber shark costume to a campus party, get rid of them. You don't need that kind of negativity in your life. But while being yourself, it's important to find some like-minded people. This is a picture with my PhD lab. You can see there are actually several people who had the same idea to wear shark costumes to that same campus party. I have found my people. And the best advice I can give is do what you love and love what you do. This is a photo of 6-year-old me playing with a toy shark. I have loved sharks as long as my family can remember, despite growing up in Pittsburgh, pretty far from the ocean. My parents have always been very supportive of this crazy dream of mine, though I think they always thought I would grow out of it. But I am now living my childhood dream, and one of my favorite parts of it is getting to talk to people about it, just like you, and I'm excited to take your questions in just a minute here. But first, I want to note, for any teachers who are watching that are still in touch with your classes regularly, virtually over Zoom or Skype, I am happy to join you and talk about sharks and answer any questions your students have. This offer also holds for any parents whose kids' schools are closed and you're unexpectedly homeschooling. I am available to come talk to you guys about sharks. I have thus far done this to hundreds of kids around the world during the shutdown. I thank you very much for listening so far. Again, I am Why Sharks Matter on every social media service you can imagine. It's also my Gmail address. I would love to hear from you. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know if you'd like me to come speak with your group or your class or to your kids. And I will stop screen sharing now so we can start. And I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
All right, everybody. Give David a big round of applause from your couch. Yay! Awesome stuff. Gosh, sharks really are incredible.
Love them.
I had no idea about some of the diversity in shape and size. I mean, I knew there were lots of different kinds of wild and interesting sharks.
That's a frilled shark.
A frilled shark.
Sort of snake-like in appearance. Yeah. I have my educational model set up on my desk because I've been doing a lot of these chats with first graders this past week. My wife calls them toys. I call them educational models.
Yeah. I like educational models. Yeah. Well, so I want to remind everybody, if you've got questions for David, you can post those in the chat box there. We're taking a look at those. But David, what sort of, how do you choose what sharks to study? Do you go for the most endangered, the easiest ones to find? How do you get started?
Yeah, so those are two great ways to do it. It sort of depends on your goal of a given research project. If the overall, in terms of what we call conservation triage, there aren't enough resources to save everything all at once. So pick the things that are most endangered. That's an effort that's championed by some groups. There's also something called the Edge of Existence program with EDGE as a acronym, and that's evolutionarily distinct, globally endangered. So it's not just they're in trouble, but they represent a unique genetic lineage. So the weird and wonderful species that are in trouble. If we were to lose us, the argument there is if we were to lose something that has no close relatives, that's worse than if we were to lose something that has another closely related species. In terms of what to study, often it's a question of what funding is available. There are some funds available through government agencies like NOAA, which is when I'm allowed to leave my house. NOAA headquarters is about a 5-minute walk from where we live. They have species-specific targeted grants. Hey, we want to know more about what's going on with shortfin mako reproductive biology. Apply for funds for that. Sometimes it's just a matter of you're already out in a particular area doing studies and you notice you're catching a lot of a particular species, so it might be a good time to study it. My master's work was with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources Shark Survey, which was entirely or almost entirely funded at the time by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources Red Drum Survey. What I mean by that is when you're trying to catch red drum, which are an important game fish, one of the biggest things you catch other than red drum with that same gear while you're out fishing is small sharks. So they put a research program on top of that. So it's a combination of opportunity and need and priority.
Cool, thanks. Well, we do have questions coming in through the chat,
Great.
So let's take some. Kim was very excited to learn about cloned sharks.
Yeah.
And said, I assume all the clones are females, but are they?
Yes, they are genetically identical to the mother. They are. It's crazy how they first discovered this is nuts. This was at a zoo in Omaha, Nebraska that had a shark tank, so pretty far from the ocean. And they for years had several female bonnet head sharks in the shark tank. And one morning they came in and there were a bunch of baby sharks swimming around. And they went, that's weird. And they called in a scientist and he did genetic testing and found they were all exact genetic replicas of one of the mothers. And it's since been discovered in several other species and it's been observed in sawfish in the wild.
Wow. That would be surprising to come into your aquarium in the morning. And
yeah, like if it was in Florida, that would almost make sense because people do weird things in Florida, like catch a shark and break into an aquarium and dump it in there. That might happen. I don't know. That wouldn't surprise me if I learned a story like that happened in Florida. But in Nebraska, there's not a source of wild sharks particularly accessible. So yeah, they were pretty surprised to see the babies.
I would imagine so. Let's see. Let's take another one from the chat. Taylor wants to know, what advice, if any, do you have for an environmental science graduate who wants to get involved in shark science, education, conservation?
Yeah. So it depends on what exactly you want to do, because those are all very different career paths. And the sort of stuff I do, which is called conservation biology, is a mix of policy and science. My PhD program was in environmental science and policy. So it's sort of a hybrid. The sort of stuff that I'm doing in DC is studying how science influences policy and also working with environmental groups to help make sure more science and more accurate science is used in policy. It depends. So the advice is, it depends on what you want to do. If you want to be doing research, you're very likely going to need some graduate school. If you want to be if you're planning on working for an environmental nonprofit organization, that's a very worthy career path. It's just one I'm not qualified to give any advice about what is required or how to pursue that. And in policy stuff, there are internships with government agencies that can be helpful. A great one is called the Knaus Fellowship. And North Carolina sends people to NOAA through the Knaus Fellowship. Yeah, that's some general quick advice.
Do some research.
Yep.
Figure out if you want to go into research.
Yep.
Let's see. Caitlin, great question. Can you share some of your favorite diving experiences?
Oh yeah, sure. So I want to note here, this is a question that I've been getting weirdly often, is people who say, I've been told I can't become a marine biologist because I'm medically unable to scuba dive. And that's just not true. I scuba dive, I love it, but I do it entirely for fun. It's not part of my work at all. And I, in fact, don't know a lot of marine biologists who scuba dive for their job. And I know a lot of marine biologists who never even go on boats because they get seasick. So you can study the ocean without, even if you have medical contraindications to scuba diving. But I love scuba diving. I do it just for fun now. We did a night dive in Hawaii with manta rays. That was amazing. Um, that was super cool. I studied abroad in Australia on the Great Barrier Reef, and the diving there is unbelievable, or at least it used to be. There's been some troubling bleaching events there recently. Um, and I did a really cool dive when I was spending a semester at the Duke Marine Lab at one of the wrecks off there with all the sand tiger sharks. Love that.
I've got a question. What is the best shark?
Oh yes, follow hashtag best shark on Twitter and Instagram to learn all about this. But it is the sandbar shark, which you can see on my business card here. That was also my title slide. I love my sandbar sharks, and they don't get enough love. So I've been having this hashtag best shark campaign for them for years now. I just got actually exciting news on this front that it is the 150th anniversary of the American Fisheries Society this year, which is a scientific professional society. And to celebrate, they wanted to compile a crowdsourced list of 150 great American fish. And I nominated sandbar shark, and it was officially accepted. So sandbar shark is officially a great American fish according to the American Fisheries Society. But I love them and follow hashtag best shark. And you'll also see lots of scientists from around the world giving me crap for picking what they perceive as a boring species. You'll see hashtag yawn shark in some of the replies.
Oh
Yeah,
no, not
I love
yawn
my
shark.
sandbar sharks.
Not yawn shark. That's terrible. Okay. There's lots of questions rolling in. I want to keep this
Great.
going. Karen, great question. Are all shark species on the decline, or are there some that are thriving or even expanding their range or population?
Yeah, so many species of sharks are in trouble. In fact, according to the IUCN Red List, an international group of scientific experts, 24% of all known species of sharks and their relatives are considered threatened with extinction. And I don't think there's been a single one that's gone from threatened to not threatened. There have been several that have gotten worse in the last few years. There are some species, not threatened species, that are improving, and species off the southeastern U.S. are doing very well because of decades of science-based management by NOAA. There are definitely species that are rebounding. They're still way down from where they were, but they're starting to improve, and that's great news. An interesting story with this is the great white sharks, what's behind me here, are starting to return to Cape Cod, but they've been gone for so long that there are people who can say, and you see on these evening news interviews, I've been coming to Cape Cod every summer for 60 years and I've never heard of a great white shark, and now they're here all the time. Uh, but that's absolutely true. They weren't there in that person's lifetime, but in ecological history, 100 years ago, and for the millions of years before that, they were. So it's a tricky issue from an environmental communication standpoint, because you don't want to ignore that person's lived experience. They're absolutely right. There have not been great white sharks there in the time you've been vacationing at the Cape, but they're supposed to be there, and it's good and natural that they're coming back. It just means that some people maybe shouldn't be going for swims by themselves at dawn anymore, and that requires some changes.
You mentioned just now the very long history that sharks have on Earth.
Mhm.
And there's actually a question that came through
Cool.
related to this from Eric, who wanted to know, what is the evolutionary background of sharks? What do we know about them from fossil remains, for example?
Yeah. So there have been sharks swimming in the ocean for over 450 million years. That is well before there were dinosaurs on land. That's before there were trees on land. And the earliest sharks look an awful lot like what you would expect a shark to look like. You would definitely see it and recognize that's a shark. They have some weird features that we don't see anymore, but it's definitely a sharky shape, and they've been around a long time and largely unchanged. It's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's not natural selection pressure. They're well adapted. They're just not well adapted to dealing with humans and industrial scale fishing gear.
Caitlin wants to know, oh, sorry, Margarita, if a great white ended up stranded in shallow water, what would happen to it?
So that actually happens sometimes. And there was a great story of this, again, off Cape Cod, where a juvenile great white got stranded when the tide went out. And people dug a pit for it and filled it with salt water and dug a tunnel for it out of the sand to the ocean. And and there were just lines of people bringing buckets of salt water, and they kept this alive. And scientists put a tag on it. That shark's doing well now. So it doesn't happen very often. Normally, they're pretty good about not getting stuck, but it does happen sometimes.
Pepperdine wants to know how you study the physiology of sharks, in particular endangered species.
Yeah. So you have to be really, when you're dealing with endangered species, it's tricky. Like, you don't want, there are some research methods that do require sacrificing the shark. You can't look at their liver chemistry, for example, without cutting out the liver. And you can't do that from an alive animal. So scientists try to minimize that. The work that I do is all non-lethal, minimally invasive stuff. But it's important to do this other research to get data necessary to protect the species. There are a lot of blood tests you can do. A lot of the work I did during my PhD was with shark blood. My colleague Austin Gallagher has a really cool device called an iStat, which is basically, the interface is like a Game Boy. You draw shark blood, put it on the cartridge, stick it in the Game Boy, and it tells you the CO2 level of the blood, the lactic acid level of the blood, and a few other things. So you can study the stress physiology that way. There are some sharks that you can keep in captivity that you can put electronic apparatuses in them to monitor what's happening to them during different physiological stresses. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. Some of them do require sacrificing the animal. Many of them don't. Some of them require captivity. Some of them you can do on an animal that you catch and just work with for a few minutes and then let go. Yeah, good question. But
Great
with endangered
question.
species, you have to be really careful. If we ever have to sacrifice a rare species, you make sure that you do everything you can, that every drop of it is used for something.
Margarita also had another great question. If you know of any deep sea sharks, which you mentioned, I think you said the megamouth or deep sea sharks?
Megamouth. Love them. I have an educational model of the megamouth.
Let's see.
Its mouth is closed here, but you can see they're sort of gummy, and the teeth are sort of back in. The gums are what glow in the dark. Yeah, there are a lot of deep sea sharks, and they're super cool. A great one, because I know we have some kids watching here. My favorite deep sea shark, other than the megamouth, is what's called the ninja lantern shark. It's called a lantern shark. There's a whole family of lantern sharks. Lantern sharks glow in the dark, and that's why they're called that. But ninja lantern shark, my colleague and friend Vicky Vasquez discovered this species and was trying to think of what to name it, and happened to be at a family dinner and had young cousins there, and said, "What can I name this shark? Like, what do you guys think I should name this shark?" And one of her young cousins said, "Ninjas are awesome. So make it a ninja shark." And she said, "Yeah." So now we have a ninja lantern shark.
So does ninja apply to some aspect of its behavior?
Nope.
Or no?
Not at all.
Like, this is a great name for a shark.
Yep.
I love that. Okay. I've got, there's so many more cool questions here. Molly, what about our current situation, current events, coronavirus, COVID?
Yeah.
How is that impacting marine biology, you think?
Yeah, all field research is basically shut down, probably for the whole summer. I saw a really troubling report. It's bad for fishermen, especially fishermen in the U.S. who have been sacrificing for years to make their fisheries some of the most sustainable in the world and environmentally friendly in the world. Most of their business is the restaurant industry rather than people buying at home. So they're really hurting. And they didn't get as much, anywhere near as much as they asked for in this recent stimulus package. So it's bad for that. But in Canada, the government just said that they're not going to be putting what are called fisheries observers on fishing trips anymore. And fisheries observers are independent scientists who go out on these fishing boats and make sure that everyone's following the rules and not catching and killing any endangered species when they're not supposed to. And now the fishing's still happening, but no one's looking. That's problematic. The biggest thing is probably scientific conferences are all shut down, and field research is all shut down. Universities are closed. the sort of work I do, I can do from here. I basically live on Zoom these days, and but for a lot of my friends and family are struggling, or friends and colleagues are struggling.
Yeah, that's there are so many impacts across
Yeah,
so many different levels of society. Okay, Kristen wants to know, you mentioned bull sharks
yeah.
that are now found in North Carolina. A few years back, Kristen read an article suggesting sharks in North Carolina are coming closer to the shore because of climate change impacting water salinity.
Hmm.
Thoughts on that?
So that I don't think that's quite what's happening. Sharks have always been coming really close to shore, but what's different now? They've been doing that for millions of years. Again, close to shore still means in the water. What's different now is everyone has an HD camera with them at the beach. So when they see this happening, they have a scary looking video that the news can show. So people have drones or GoPros or their smartphones now when they go to the beach. So this natural behavior that's been happening forever, all of a sudden we're newly seeing tons of videos of it. And at groups like Shark Week, they had a special called Shallow Water Invasion that was all about this. It was just nonsense. In terms of climate change affecting salinity, it does a little, I think, but not much, and not enough to be affecting shark distributions. The main thing it's affecting is temperature, and that influences what fish go where. But there's also what they call climate change's evil twin, which is ocean acidification. The oceans get more acidic. They're already so acidic that some types of oysters are starting to dissolve in some places. Um, that can be problematic for sharks. It affects their sense of smell, among other things. Yeah, smell is a chemical process, and when the chemistry of the background environment changes, it doesn't work as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, prey also can't smell predators. So there's a lot of what we call increased boldness in prey fish. But ordinarily they'd see like, oh, there's a predator nearby. Maybe I should hide, but they can't smell it. Yeah, bad news.
Hmm. I'm wondering, because I think I heard something similar to what Kristen was thinking about. And I'm wondering if it's not where the sharks can move when they move up into estuaries.
Yeah. So shark, a lot of species of sharks can tolerate what's called brackish water, which is a not quite fully freshwater, not quite fully saltwater. It's in estuaries like inside Pamlico Sound. It's not fully salt because you have the rivers coming in. Lots of species of sharks can tolerate that. Bull sharks can tolerate fully fresh water for a few weeks or months. And there's a whole species, a whole group of species called the river sharks found in Southeast Asia and Northern Australia that may spend almost their entire lives in fresh water. So some species are better adapted to that than others. Good question.
Okay. Caitlin asks, are clones of sharks considered for species survival plans since clones increase population but not genetic diversity?
Yeah, there aren't. So we're still working for species survival plans as a technical definition for a thing used by zoos and aquariums. There aren't a lot of those for sharks yet. Captive breeding sharks is just it happens, but it's not done on a large scale the same way that you might see for some rare mammals or yeah. So in general, yeah, you've nailed the problem with it. That if a mother clones herself, she's increased the population by a few, but has not increased the diversity, and that's bad genetically.
These questions are amazing. Y'all are doing a great job. So, which shark is the most affected by global warming?
Yeah, there are most species of sharks are not that affected. Many ocean animals are, but sharks in general can just move the way bull sharks we documented. Except there are some that are restricted in where they can live, and they can't move. And if their environment becomes unsuitable, that's bad. There was a great study done by a colleague of mine named Andrew Chin in Australia about this. And he found, I think it was like 95% of Australian sharks can just move, but some of them only live right at the mouth of a particular river or only live in a particular place and they can't move and they're in trouble. And those are sharks that I cannot remember offhand. But the paper is Chin et al. 2010. If anyone wants to do a Google Scholar search while in quarantine.
Yeah, there you go. Plenty of good reading on Google Scholar for you. Shelby asks, what do you think is the most dangerous shark, and what do most people say the most dangerous shark is?
Well, it depends how you define most dangerous.
Mm.
Is it the most bites or the most serious injuries or the most deaths? Because those are all different species. But again, overall, sharks don't bite people that often. It is a very, very, very minor risk. And compared to the enormous ecosystem service benefits they provide, it's no question that we are better off with healthy shark populations off our coast than we are without them. But the species that has killed the most people is what's behind me, the great white. The species responsible for the most bites, I think, is the blacktip. Or at least that was the last time I looked a few years ago. And that's because they're just really common off beaches, but they're small. Most people who are bitten by blacktips don't even need stitches. Some don't even need a Band-Aid. So it depends on how you're counting most dangerous. The thing I would least want to be bit by is that, because they're just so big and powerful that even exploratory bites, test bites, can cause serious injury or even death.
But just to drive home, you don't really have to be too worried about it.
Yep.
Maybe don't get in the ocean at dawn.
Yep. Don't wear a wetsuit made out of raw tuna, or you're probably going to be fine.
Raw tuna. Okay. Let's see. Caitlin is asking, can you speak about why sharks are used for cancer research? Why don't sharks get cancer?
So that's a great question. The answer is sharks do get cancer.
Oh.
There is a book, you can be forgiven for not knowing that, because there is a book called Sharks Don't Get Cancer and a follow-up book called Sharks Still Don't Get Cancer, which are written by the 1980s equivalent of Dr. Oz, someone who is trying to get rich quick off people who don't understand science while misrepresenting things. Sharks do get cancer. And it's not a new thing. The first documented case of shark cancer was in the 1850s, and they got it before that. That was just when we started looking. But there are people who say sharks don't get cancer, so if you have cancer, just eat some drowned up shark and it'll cure you. That's not how this works. And that leads to increased pressure on vulnerable populations. That's the equivalent of saying, I'm bad at basketball, I should eat LeBron James and get better at basketball. That doesn't make sense. That's not how you don't gain the powers of something by consuming it. So there's a misleading pseudoscience industry that is trying to take advantage of desperate people, and sharks are caught in the crossfire there. But sharks do have an amazing immune system. They do get sick, but they have an amazing ability to recover and defend against things, and they are being used for some legitimate biomedical research. They also have incredible abilities to heal from injuries. So I have a colleague who's working on a Department of Defense grant to study how sharks and stingrays heal so well to hopefully help wounded soldiers. But some of the images are crazy how quickly like in a day, a major cut is gone. The craziest example of this, which I wrote about in my scuba diving magazine column last summer, there was a shark that swallowed a sharp piece of metal, not a hook, but like something, just a piece of metal that was in the environment. And over the course, this was a shark that was regularly seen on a reef, so they were able to document this every few days from photos. Over the course of several weeks, it pushed the piece of shark metal just out its side. And then like a week after that, that was totally healed, and there was no evidence that there had ever been an injury of any kind. That's bananas.
That's crazy.
There's a species of catfish called the blue catfish that also does that, which makes it very hard to put tags in them, because a foreign body is just expelled out the side of the body wall. But we want to put tags in them and track where they go. So it's tricky.
Nature is wild, y'all.
Yeah.
All right, Dave, I'm going to ask this question.
Uh-oh.
Dave Necht, MMA Shark Edition. What 4 species of shark would be the most entertaining to watch in the octagon?
Yeah, I saw that the UFC was canceled for the rest of the season too, and I'm sad. I think the thresher shark would be a strong contender. No one would say, normally you're worried about the bitey end of the shark, but with that whip tail, that would be really interesting. Great whites are classics, never go out of style. They're very powerful. What else would be in there? I love that. I love that angel shark. That's one that was sleeping on the bottom that something swam by and it just that would be interesting if anyone got into the wrong corner with it. Not only three. Uh, mm, Spinner sharks are cool. They can jump out of the water really high, so maybe it could attack from an unexpected angle.
Nice. I'm impressed that you came up with 4 sharks to put into the ring.
But
Okay.
don't do that, please. I know we're
Yeah,
all bored for
not.
lack of sports.
Just come watch the Science Cafe. Okay, Margarita, lots of great questions. Margarita read a book on marine biology and has a
Cool.
question. What kinds of behavioral patterns do sharks have?
Oh, lot. Sharks are sharks are a lot smarter than most people think they are. That's amazing speech in Jaws about how all they do is swim and kill and make more sharks. Their lives are actually a lot more complicated than that, and they're capable of some incredible behaviors. The things that are most amazing to me are just migrations across the open ocean. That they can swim thousands of miles and then end up right back where they started. There's no street signs in the open ocean. There's no landmarks. They just know. They can navigate using the Earth's magnetic field, which is pretty cool. Some species of sharks do have social behaviors and social hierarchies. There's one that's the boss, and that the others listen to. Some sharks have friends, individuals that they preferentially spend time with. Some sharks have enemies, individual sharks of their species they preferentially avoid. Some sharks have what's called social learning, which is if there's a complicated skill or ability and they watch another shark do it, they can figure out how to do it without having to learn it all themselves. So sharks have pretty rich and complicated lives, much more than most people think. But there's that almost cliche quote that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you'll think it's an idiot. How you define intelligence, how you define interesting behavior, a lot of it's very human centric. And sharks can do a lot of cool stuff that we can't do.
They can breathe underwater.
That's a big one.
That's a. All right, we're going to take a couple more. I heard that sharks hate the taste of human flesh. Is that true?
It's hard to tell hate. There's certainly sharks do have the ability to taste, and they certainly react differently when they bite a human than when they bite their regular prey. So they seem to recognize something's not right. Hate is maybe not the right word, but are aware that we're not what they thought we were for sure. That's why a lot of shark bites are so relatively minor, because the shark immediately realizes, oh my god, I don't know what that was, and stops.
Shelby's asking a timely question. Do you think sharks will be able to get the coronavirus?
Yeah.
And would it hurt the population?
So I was asked a question about this by a first grader in one of my chats earlier this week, and I didn't know, so I looked it up. And I have this old 1990 NOAA technical memorandum about the life history of sharks that I had on my desk that I hadn't looked at in 10 years. And there's not any known cases of a human passing a disease to a shark, but sharks can pass diseases to humans. And that's alarming. Is this current disease, this virus that we're worried about now, why everyone's home, is what's called a zoonosis, a zoonotic disease, that it's spread from an animal to a human. Sharks have those too. There's a well-known example of this with other fish called fish handler's disease. And people who just deal with a lot of dead fish get nasty infections on their hands. There's something related to this that people who live and work in the Arctic sometimes get, called seal finger, which is if you're bitten by a seal, it can lead to this nasty rotting bacteria. I think it's a bacteria, it might be a virus on your hand. So can humans pass a disease to a shark? I don't think so, but sharks can pass diseases to humans. And we don't know how bad that would be. It hasn't happened much, but it has happened.
I think I'm going to take Taylor's question is going to be our last one. And it's something that you mentioned in your presentation, and that I know I've seen you tweet about a lot on social media, and probably something good to talk about is shark finning the biggest human created threat to the shark population, or is there something larger?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. Let me define, first of all, let's start by defining our terms. For those of you not familiar with this, shark finning is a process of fishing where people catch a shark and cut the fins off the shark and throw the rest of the shark back into the ocean where it will slowly bleed to death or drown. This is done because the fins are more valuable per pound than the meat. And they're used to make a traditional Asian delicacy called shark fin soup. Shark finning has been illegal in the United States since 1993. If a shark is landed, if the whole shark is brought to shore, that shark has not been finned, even if the fins are later removed and sold. Finning only means you cut the fins off at sea, you dump the carcass at sea. So people use that term wrongly all the time, and it drives me crazy. And I see pictures of piles of dead sharks in a seafood market with hashtag stop shark finning. That's not shark finning. Stopping shark finning would not stop that. So we need to know our terms, and it's a legal term that means something. Overfishing is the biggest threat facing sharks. Humans are killing too many sharks for meat and for fins on purpose and accidentally as bycatch. Overfishing is the problem. And the solution to that problem is reducing fishing pressure, which does not mean that we need to ban all fishing everywhere. Some species can withstand some species are healthy and can withstand a sustainable fishery. I support sustainable fisheries as a solution to many of the ocean's problems, including shark population crises. And there are sustainable shark fisheries. U.S. caught shark is some of the most sustainable in the world. But it's a good question, though. And you'll hear the term shark finning all the time. And I'd say 94% of the cases of it that I see on Twitter are not shark finning.
Excellent stuff. Okay, I have to throw one more out there because more than one person has asked this question now. But this one, you should probably, I think you'll have a pretty quick answer to this one, David.
Okay.
Do you believe Megalodon is still alive?
Oh, good Lord. No. If there was a 50-foot long whale-eating shark that lived off the coast of the east coast of the U.S., there would be some evidence of it. It's not there anymore. Megalodon was a real shark. If you've ever been to a science museum or an aquarium and have had those amazing shark jaws you can stand in and take a picture, I don't remember if the North Carolina Museum has that.
We do.
Yeah. So Megalodon was real. Here's a 3D printed in gold Megalodon tooth to give you a sense of their scale. It was an impressive animal. This is the weirdest conspiracy theory that I deal with is that, oh, they're not extinct. They're just hiding and the government is covering it up. Why would we be lying about a fish? They are definitely extinct. Shark Week lied to you about this. This was also the plot of the Jason Statham movie, The Meg, last year. That's based on an old book series that I'm in. There's in the Meg book, Meg 4, Hell's Aquarium, there is a David Shiffman marine biologist character. So I love those books. They're trashy fiction garbage. They're not real, but they're great books. Yeah, I don't know why so many people believe that this extinct animal is still alive. If it was, there would be evidence, and there isn't any. Great. It's a good question, though. I'm glad to get to clear the air about that.
There you go.
If you are bored later, Google my name and Megalodon, and it's me ranting about this on various media outlets when Shark Week lied about it. Should be all over there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, even if they don't go look up your Twitter rants on the topic, everybody should definitely go follow David on social media at Why Sharks Matter, whether you're on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Great sharky stuff all the time. David, thanks for doing this. Thanks for
having me. Yeah.
This has been so much fun.
It's great to see you, and stay safe, everybody.
You too, David. Hey, everybody, I want to remind you that we will be back here next Thursday night. We're going to have the museum's mammologist, Dr. Mike Cove, talking about his research right here at the museum's YouTube channel. You can get more information about that program at naturalsciences.org. And while you're there, you can check out our Science at Home page, which has all kinds of do-it-yourself activities, great things for anybody to take a look at. You can get links to our video archive, so you can watch science cafes, great presentations from experts, for years going back, an incredible archive of researchers talking about the stuff they love to talk about the most. All of that information is at naturalsciences.org. And while you're following at Why Sharks Matter, go ahead and drop a follow for at Natural Sciences, the museum, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And you can connect with us and get updates on all the cool stuff we're doing too. David, once more, thank you. Round of applause.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you next time. Bye.